Biz Stone's claim to fame is as co-founder of Twitter, which launched in 2006. Who knew 140 characters could have so much power in changing the way information is shared, from breaking news to organizing protests and getting the word out about disasters to finding out Justin Bieber vomited during his Believe tour? I had to say that. Last year, with his longtime collaborators Evan Williams and Jason Goldman, Biz Stone co-founded the Obvious Corporation to focus on building systems that help people work together to improve the world. The centerpiece of Obvious is called Medium, which encourages people to express themselves in a medium-length format and sorts blog posts by topic rather than author. We're lucky to have NPR digital culture correspondent Laura Sydell here to interview Biz Stone. Please welcome Biz Stone and Laura Sydell to the JCCSF.
So, if you're missing the debates, you can always check the tweets, right? Because I'm sure that a lot of people are out there busy tweeting.
I'm sure the debates are really great, and they have nothing to do with talking points.
And probably nothing to do with talking points. Well, the nice thing about Twitter is it will keep people, or people give their honest reaction often on Twitter, and that is actually one of the things that makes it kind of special. You know, as a journalist, I have actually found it to be an incredibly useful tool. And there have been times when I first learned about a story on Twitter. It is often the best tool for breaking news. Among the people I follow on Twitter is you. You don't tweet that much.
No, because Ev told me that I'm a bad tweeter. my friend and co-founder of Twitter told me that I'm bad at tweeting. But I told him that it's because I'm just trying to show people that, you know, there's a low bar you don't have to worry about. You don't have to be fancy. You can just tweet anything. But now, I'm tweeting more. I tweeted when I arrived here that Apple Maps insisted that the name of this place was like St. Edward the Confessor Catholic Church. And I'm pretty sure they're wrong about that.
I think they've still got a lawsuit on that one. Wait a minute. Yeah, well, you know, I feel like given that I read a lot of tweets, I would say the bar is not necessarily that high. So,
good, then I've succeeded.
Yeah. You know, I think about 140 characters and what you can accomplish in 140 characters. And I've wondered, in 140 characters, what was the most emotional tweet you ever got, where you got a tweet and you looked at it and you actually had a strong, visceral, emotional reaction?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is when Evan's wife tweeted, "Dear Internet, my water just broke." But the other one that comes to mind is, and I don't recall it word for word, but when Giannis Krum tweeted the photo of Sully Sullenberger's successful landing of the plane in the Hudson. And that was an amazing, just a totally amazing tweet.
That's a pretty good one. I mean, I had forgotten about that incident, but that's a really good one. So, one of the questions I've always wanted to ask you, and I suspect I'm not the only person who's thought of this, is when you started Twitter, did you have any inkling that it would become attached to something like the Arab Spring? Did you ever think that it could become this sort of democratizing force around the world?
The only inkling that I would say that we had, because there was a mix of, you know, we were doing it a lot of, for me anyways, a lot out of joy, but the inkling, if I had an inkling, it was because working on blogging platforms prior to working on Twitter, I knew that for some people in the world, the internet and specifically blogging, and you know, more specifically the idea that you didn't have to know how to code or write HTML, enabled you to have a voice. I knew that that was important, and I knew that, you know, for some people around the world, a blog was an important way of being able to communicate their situation. So an inkling, yes, but not a full-blown suspicion or realization that it would be that important, but certainly a bit of an inkling.
I mean, I remember I talked to you early on about the founding of Twitter, and I think the first tweet you ever got had to do with you were pulling up the carpet in your house. And
yeah, well, one of the first sort of, while we were prototyping, examples of why Twitter was kind of a joy for us was that, my wife and I had bought this little tiny house in Berkeley, and I had watched enough Bob Vila in This Old House when I was a kid to think that, well, if you rip up the carpeting, you expose the beautiful hardwood underneath, and there was no hardwood, and also they really nailed that carpeting down and I was just sweating and tearing up carpeting and realizing I was making a huge mistake, but I had gone too far already. And then my phone buzzes in my pocket. It's Evan, and his tweet says, "Sipping Pinot Noir after a massage in Napa Valley." And that's when I laughed out loud. My wife thought I'd gone crazy, but I knew at that point that I was having fun, and I also realized later that there was a lesson to be learned there, that if you're going to be successful in any startup, you have to be emotionally invested in the product that you're working on. And we hadn't been emotionally invested in the product we were previously working on, which is one of the reasons why it didn't go anywhere.
That's an important, I want to get back to that because I think that was an important lesson, but I'm thinking about the trajectory of that moment, which was sort of a small thing. Twitter began to grow, and you were still at Twitter full-time during the Arab Spring, the heat of it, and I believe there was actually a call from the State Department at one point. You were about to put the servers down, and
Put them down
for a break, fix them up.
Yeah, we were going to have what we called a maintenance window, which we had already put off like a dozen times because it was always inconvenient to take the service down for someone somewhere in the world. And we finally said, if we don't do it now, then the whole service is going to be offline for 12 days or some ridiculous amount of time. So we said we just have to do it, and we published, as we normally did, the date and time that the maintenance window would occur, and we were flooded with we were just absolutely flooded with tweets, with emails, with phone calls. I mean, everybody. It wasn't like it was just the red phone that rang. And they all said, "What, are you crazy? Like, that's this is one of the most important days for us here in Egypt, and you absolutely can't take the servers down." And we thought about it, and we thought, like, the conundrum was, are we getting involved in world politics, or is it simply correct for us to keep the service up? And we decided the right thing to do was to figure out a way to keep the service up and narrow the maintenance window and do it at a different time, and that's really all it was a responsibility to our users.
That brings something I wanted to ask you about. Is this, the State Department, I think.
But the big thing I wanted to, the big thing that I made sure everyone knew about that after we did that was I wrote a long blog post about it, or not too long, but long enough, medium length.
Funny you wrote that.
To say, look, everyone tweeted us, everyone emailed us, everyone called us. The State Department does not have any sort of influence over our decision making here at the company. We are a neutral technology platform, and we don't kowtow to any government wishes unless it's under specific law or something that we just absolutely have to agree to because it's part of doing business. We wouldn't have done that just because someone from the White House called.
That's, I don't know that people necessarily knew that, or
well,
that
I
that
wanted
was
to make
out.
that abundantly clear
Yeah.
because one day it might be something good, the next day it might be something bad. So you need to make sure that your stance is neutral.
I was going to bring up in contrast, as you know, right now there's a case going on in New York City where the Manhattan District Attorney is bringing charges against an Occupy Wall Street protester and has basically subpoenaed the tweets of this protester to prove that this protester knew that he was breaking the law when he stepped out on the Brooklyn Bridge. And Twitter has resisted handing them over, but then was finally pushed. So it's sort of funny. Like on the one hand, you have had the State Department trying to cozy up to you, and on the other hand, you have the Manhattan District Attorney's Office that's been trying to push you into handing over these tweets.
Right. I mean, one thing I can't do is speak to any current operational decisions on Twitter because I haven't worked there since June of 2011.
I was going to ask you that.
But from a higher altitude, yeah, that's a perfect explanation of how a communications or information network, a company that operates such a thing, has to remain neutral and has to have a policy where they say we don't get involved in matters of mediating content, and on the flip side, what we've always said was that the tweets must flow and people are entitled to a freedom of expression and will defend the user's right to express themselves as far and as hard as we can. And it serves to illustrate that one day you may get a call that makes you look like a hero, and the next day you may get a call that makes you look like a villain. So you have to make sure that you're sticking to a very simple policy, which is we will only do X, Y, and Z under these circumstances, and that's what we do.
So there has to be a consistency. What's your relationship now with Twitter? I mean, you've left being there full time, but you still do have a relationship with it.
Yeah, well, I'll never stop being a co-founder of Twitter, which is kind of like
Probably
being
not.
a parent. And so what I do now is I'll go once or twice a month over there, and I'll review new product plans or listen to the communication team's overall strategy and what they're talking about, or more importantly to me, what's the culture like at this growing company, and is it staying true to the roots of the idea that a company really should be a vehicle for success for the individuals who work at the company, and it should help them grow and learn, become better people, and a company should also have a responsibility to its community and to the world in some capacity to make it a better place, and all those sorts of things. So I mean, to its credit, Twitter's done a wonderful job by moving into an area of San Francisco that needs revitalization. They continue to implement programs and plans within Twitter that allow people to practice yoga and eat healthy and all these wonderful things within the company that are looked at as perks, but in fact, over time, if you look at them, are actually beneficial to the health of the company as well, because if people are healthier, then they're out sick less, et cetera, and you actually are more productive.
Do you ever look at it though and go in now? I mean, it is growing. I think it's up to about 1,000 employees.
Yeah, it's over 1,200.
Over 1,200 employees now. And do you ever look at, I mean, it's now as it grows, you have to make decisions that are also about making a profit, promoted tweets, and a variety of ways that, will shift it a little bit. So do you ever look at it and worry about the direction that it will take moving forward, and keeping a balance between like, oh yeah, we have promoted tweets, we're working with the Olympics. I mean, there's a little incident around that where they accidentally closed down an account of somebody, I guess.
Well, I think there's do I worry? Yeah. I mean, ideally a company could benefit from network effects just like a system would, in that a company could get better as there are more people joining it. The presumption is that a company gets worse to work at as it gets giant, and that you get lost in the shuffle and it becomes like sort of this nameless corporate entity. But ideally, it could get better as it gets bigger. But at the same time, I know that there's a growth, there has to be a certain kind of maturity that comes with growth. And so people generally are afraid of change, but change has to happen at a company like Twitter as it gets bigger and bigger. So there's worry, but there's also, excitement for the future.
I guess I mean too, not necessarily just internally, but also it seems like you are an entrepreneur who really cares about making a positive impact on the world with the ideas that you develop. You're very interested in community, in free expression, and I wonder, how do you keep Twitter as both a platform that can be used for personal expression for a lot of people, for sharing information, and also make it grow and become a profitable company? Are you at all concerned that the two things will come into conflict as it grows?
Well, again, I have to remind you that I don't actually work there.
You don't work. I guess I want to say and I mean this as looking at your child grow up. Let me put it. So you're watching your child grow up. You've sent it out into the world, and now you're looking at it more from a distance, and you can watch your child grow up and hope that they become a wonderful adult that does wonderful things in the world. But you always fear they could take a wrong turn, too.
Yeah, well, one of the speeches I gave early on to a very small group of Twitter employees was that we are like a child actor getting a lot of fame very early. And in many ways that could lead us to grow up as a very troubled adult. And who we wanted to be more like was Ron Howard, a successful child actor and now a very successful and level-headed producer and director in Hollywood. And so we are, the way that I look at it is that if you're talking about it as a child, it needs to learn how to feed itself and sustain itself and, move out of the house, make money, and eventually take care of its parents. Hello. That'd be me. So I do think that it's an important maturation, part of the process of maturing that Twitter finds a way to monetize, to become a profitable entity while still maintaining the idea that the definition of success now is financial success, of course, traditional business success, but also it isn't success unless it has financial success and is making a positive impact in the world and is a joy for all of its employees to work at, and that also, what I said before, a transformational vehicle for those people as well, for them to grow and become better people. All of those are ingredients of what I consider to be the new definition of success in capitalism.
New definition of success.
Higher bar, let's raise the bar. You gotta move forward somehow.
It's great to think about it. Given right now with what's happened with the banks and everything, if we can sort of see capitalism.
Yeah, that's a great example of like sort of going the wrong way or focusing on the wrong thing. But if you can model yourself after some of these institutes like the Rocky Mountain Institute or the Clinton Global Initiative or something and say, what would we like the world to look like in 100 years? And then back and then sort of work backwards from there. Like, well, okay, what are the things that we can build to that we think might get us there?
And you've left Twitter, so you're advising them, and I guess you're sort of hoping, like a parent, that your child will take what you say and go out and you can advise them, you can't tell them what to do. That's kind of where you're at right now.
That's exactly the relationship.
Now you've obviously done well, and you could have become a ski bum, probably at this point.
No, that was Ev's thing. I can't ski.
You can, all right.
I can scoot downhill on my butt.
All right, well.
So the word bum is probably in there somewhere.
All right, so bum. You could have become a bum.
I'm just, yeah.
You have a new baby. You could kind of do what you want, but instead you've actually decided to go out and I believe Obvious is actually something that Twitter spun out of, but you've recreated it, right?
Yeah, we formed Obvious in 2006 to do the same thing. Twitter was a project under the umbrella of Obvious, as was another company called Odeo, as were a couple of other companies that no one ever heard of because we never launched. And the idea always was we would work on things that we thought were worth working on and had some sort of value in the world. And if any one of them were to take off and become too expensive for us to work on by ourselves, then we would spin it out into its own company. And what happened was Twitter became successful and did need to be spun out, but we went with it. We took roles and we went with it. And that's what happened there. And so
So Obvious kind of died for a while.
Yeah, so Obvious just was sort of dormant for the 5 or 6 years that Evan and I and Jason Goldman worked on it. And then when we got into our heads again that we were in a position because of the deep executive bench at Twitter to be able to take another crack at it, we decided we would launch Obvious again with the same goal in mind. And we explored and we tried different things, and we ended up doing 2 things. One, developing a traditional startup within the walls of our office called Medium, which is sort of a reimagining of what publishing should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And then in addition to that, we decided to help entrepreneurs with their projects that we thought were sort of philosophically aligned with our own value system. And so those are the 2 things that we're doing now.
Let's talk about, so Medium is one of the things that you've recently launched.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
sort of half launched. We launched the ability to look at Medium, things that are published on Medium, but we didn't widely launch the ability for people to publish on Medium. So it's
Right.
kind of, we're taking our time with it. We're not just sort of blowing it open and letting it break.
Now, there's a few things that I'm sort of getting about it. I've visited the site and read a bit about it, and it's a publishing platform. And I feel like, you were also, for people who don't know, before Twitter, you were involved with the launch of Blogger.
Yeah, I worked on Blogger at the Google, as part of Google, and I also worked before that in 1999. I started a company called Xanga, Xanga.com, which was a weblogging community too.
And then you went from long form, and then you went to really short, 140 characters. And now,
that's
right?
kind of the joke is like we went like micro. No, we went like long format, then we went micro, and now we're like just right, medium. But that doesn't mean you have to, limit yourself to medium-sized things on Medium.
But is that, I don't think that's really, as I was reading it and I was thinking, that's kind of funny. He's given us, all right, so now he's going to the medium length. This must be the next trend on the web. Right. But I think my sense is what you're really trying to pick up on is quality. And you're trying to do something about it. How to figure out, because, and it's so true, I don't know anybody walking around now who isn't feeling that sense of being overwhelmed by the amount of content out there. So as I understand it, Medium is also trying to help you get a sense of like what's actually worthwhile content.
Yeah, it's our approach is that of essentially when I hear Google and Facebook and Twitter and other companies like that tell us that they're going to connect all 7 billion people on the planet to each other and to unlimited amounts of information, I say, I believe you, and now what do we do? Because it's almost as if the last 10 or 15 years have been about, okay, let's lower the barrier to participation on the internet. Let's democratize all information. And let's create infinite sources of information that are coming at everyone constantly. And we're just not wired to process infinite amounts of information. And Albert Einstein famously said, information is not knowledge. So what are we going to do? Like now we have access to infinite information. What's next? And I think we're attempting to look at that from first principles and say, okay, let's if you were to look at publishing now, even 6 years ago, everything was completely different. The media landscape has completely changed. Everyone's carrying a powerful computer in their pocket. That wasn't true 6 years ago. And so mobile is hugely important. And and all of these other things have changed. Everyone's now networked. We weren't all networked before. So why are we still printing letters on a screen just like we print them on paper? Why aren't we taking advantage of the fact that we're all mobile and we're all networked? And so we can use these tools and these and that are available to us to create a new kind of a publishing platform that seeks to address the idea that we can at least attempt to narrow down that amount of information such that it's relevant to you now and helps you make a decision. I think that my philosophy, which is still kind of unfolding in my brain, is that the next phase of the internet is going to be about not necessarily about just getting as much information as possible, but about the idea that if you can get some information and then get a good understanding of that information, get some context and get some real knowledge and comprehension out of the information, you're far more likely to be able to take some sort of action and get some sort of real world thing done. And that would be sort of a wonderful ideal world to live in, where now that we're fully networked and we have all this access, we can take information and transmute it instantly into action and actually get real things done that have a positive impact on the world. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And so that's kind of what we're trying to, what we're experimenting with building.
We're going to take questions in a few minutes, but I had so many questions to ask you.
I talk too much. That's a problem.
No. It's all interesting, and I think people want to know where you think the web is going. I guess the question would be, with what you're doing now with Medium, how are you going to do that? I mean, my understanding is there's some way in which you're ranking not only relevancy of the content, but also quality of the content?
Yeah, I think, how are we going to do that? It's going to be a combination between human intelligence and programmatic solutions. I mean, it's not an either or thing. So right now, I mean, we're super early stages, but right now what we have at the bottom of an article is, this is good. It's basically like, this was a good thing that I just read. So that's a signal to us that people like that one. But there are so many things you can measure now that the problem is that the traditional money-making format of printed articles on the web is forced web publishing companies to stick to this antiquated model of content down the middle with the big ad on top, and they're getting bigger, and links on the side that link to other things, so you can drive traffic to other places and get money for that. And if you look at some of these sites, you're like, where's the actual information that I'm supposed to be looking at? And so the business models have actually destroyed the user experience. So if you look at it fresh, you say, okay, what's the most important thing? It's the content and it's the information. So let's try to present that as clearly and as beautifully as possible first. And then let's try to capture signals such as, this is good, or did they scroll all the way to the bottom? Did they read it? How much time did they spend looking at the page? Did they, there's so many different things that we can measure now. So one of the things we're obsessed with is, what are all the different ways that we can instrument measurement besides just page views and clicks? And I think if we start measuring things accurately, we can do a better job of figuring out what's worth reading. Because if you're going to spend 10 minutes on the internet, we'd like those 10 minutes to be really worthwhile and allow you to make better decisions in your life. One of the things that Sorry, I'll just finish up. But one of the things that I've always been troubled by is this word engagement. There are some internet companies that say, our engagement levels are so great. People spend 8 hours a day on our website staring at our thing. And I'm like, is that so great? And then other companies say, like Google, for example, says, our engagement is people come back to our website 36 times a day for 30 seconds because they're finding something useful, and then they're going off and doing their work. And I think that's a much healthier way of measuring engagement. So even what you measure can make a huge impact on what you decide to do.
So I want a couple of things I definitely wanted to get to. So I'm going to change the subject to another company which might surprise people that Obvious is supporting. You're a vegetarian. and there's a company you're supporting that actually is trying to develop really good tasting fake meat.
Yeah, I've been a vegan for 13 years, and this company called Beyond Meat was presented to me a while back from someone at Kleiner Perkins, and they said, we don't know about these guys, but they've created something that is chicken, but it's not chicken. But it is chicken, but it's made from plants, and you got to try it. And I tried it, and I was totally freaked out because I thought it was chicken. And I gave it to my wife, and she was like, is this chicken? And I was like, no, it's not chicken. And we decided that if we had been given this in a restaurant, we would send it back, and we'd say there's been a mistake. Because what this company does...
This is meat.
What this company does is basically creates meat out of plant matter. And it's a proprietary process that basically realigns the proteins in plant matter to mimic those of chicken, and it looks like chicken, it tears like chicken, it tastes like chicken, it chews like chicken, and yet it's got more protein, no fat, no carbs, and it's 3,000% more efficient to create than chicken. So it's an incredible just an incredible business to be in, but it's also a delicious business to be in.
And I should say, how did you end up becoming a vegetarian? And how's that connect? I mean, is this connected to your reasons for being a vegetarian?
I'm a vegetarian for compassionate reasons, not for health reasons. I visited a place called Farm Sanctuary, which is an organization my wife and I now support, but their goal is to advocate essentially for less cruelty to farm animals, because there are animal cruelty laws, but they don't apply to farm animals, so you can do any horrible thing you want to farm animals, and some of the stuff is absolutely horrible. I watched like 30 seconds of a video, and I was like, I'm sold, I'm a vegan. And so the way I became vegan was I took my wife up to this place called Farm Sanctuary in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York for her birthday, and I watched a little bit about this video and learned a little bit about factory farming, and was just in 2 seconds became a vegan, and that's how. Yeah, that's it. There's a longer, funnier story involving a naked man running faster than our car, but that's for another time.
I'm almost tempted to push you on this, but I'm not going to. So one of the things that you try and do as an entrepreneur, it seems to me, and this is a sign of it, is it's things you are personally passionate about. And if you were to, I think I've heard you say, if you were to sort of give advice to entrepreneurs or people who want to start their own business, it's be passionate.
Yeah, I think you have to be emotionally invested in the product that you're working on, because it's that emotional attachment and investment that's going to carry you through all of the times when everyone else is telling you you're stupid and your product is terrible. You need to have that because, it carries you through all those low points, but it also keeps you, just fanatically interested in what you're working on. I mean, this was true even when I was a kid in high school. Like, I would find ways to get interested in the projects. I had to write a political science paper on something, and I decided to write it on vigilantism because that meant I could read Batman comics. And so, like, whatever it takes to make yourself sort of like find a way to get emotionally invested in your product, and that's a lot of times that's my number one piece of advice. And then after that is, if you need to be ready to fail spectacularly if you want to be willing to succeed spectacularly.
All right, so you're on to a whole other venture that I have to bring up as well. Now, I know and had remembered this actually from the first time I met you, that you mentioned you started out as an artist, and you were the creative director at Twitter. You are now involved, you mentioned Ron Howard. Well, you are now involved with a project with him to make a film using Twitter, but the photographs specifically. Tell me a little about this.
Yeah, well, the way that it's called Project Imagination, and they did it last year on a smaller scale, and it was so successful that they decided to do it this year. Essentially it's an elaborate endorsement of Canon, but Canon has done such a great job of putting the emphasis on the creativity that it doesn't feel like that. So the way the project works is hundreds of thousands of people on the internet are encouraged to submit photos that are then used as inspiration by myself and other directors, Jamie Foxx, Georgina Chapman, and some other folks, 5 in total of us. And we then look at a distilled down group of photos, because otherwise it would be too many. And we use those photos to inspire a short film, and that I get to direct and shoot under the mentorship of Ron Howard, which is just a weird circle of events because of that speech I made about Ron Howard in the early days of Twitter, and then I bumped into him at a party a few years ago, and I told him about that, and I'm convinced that he remembered that party and invited me into this project because of it.
Yeah, I mean, you made a speech about him. People probably don't know that you made a speech about him.
Yeah, well, I told him at the party, I said, I told my employees that we needed to be like Ron Howard, and he was, that's the most touching thing anyone's ever said to me. And I think when it came time to pick people to do the project with him, I think he might have remembered me. I don't know, maybe not, but...
It's a funny project. I mean, you're naming these people, and I think, wow, do these people, including you, need inspiration? Don't you have enough of your own?
Well, I love the idea, though, because it fits in perfectly with my philosophy that constraint inspires creativity. So I have to use 10 photos, and I have to use those photos to build a relevant, meaningful film from. I can't just do anything I want. I have to use those photos to inspire me, and I think that is. That, and the fact that they're submitted online by anyone who wants to participate, it fits really well in with my work in general. And one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is that yes, I started out as an artist, and maybe now the way that I express myself is by allowing hundreds of millions of people to express themselves, which is just this weird meta way of looking at it. But now with this project, I get to be very specific and get right back into it and sort of dig in and create something from scratch that will be in a special film festival, and it'll be a lot of fun.
I look forward to seeing the project. Well, I know that now I've asked my questions. I could ask more, but I want to give these folks an opportunity.
The audience, which sadly doesn't include Sadie Thaw, who I thought was going to come see me tonight, but obviously she's home watching the debates. So
she's 6,
maybe
right?
next time.
Yeah.
She's 6, but she's smart.
The first question is right here, Biz, to your right in the second row.
Brian Herzog, thanks for taking the time to speak to us tonight. Quick question. So you've worn many different hats as a founder, entrepreneur. What are some of the biggest lessons maybe that you've learned through that process and now as a founder of a company like Obvious?
One of them we've talked about, which is you have to be emotionally invested in the product you're building. I think another big one is that creativity is a renewable resource. You never run out of creativity, so don't be afraid to go back to that well over and over again. We also talked about success and failure. I think to reiterate a big lesson learned is that if you want to succeed spectacularly, you really do need to be willing to fail spectacularly. I would also, one of the things I've learned, it's not necessarily related to business, although I'm trying very hard to attach it to business and think it should be attached to business, is that altruism has a compound impact, kind of like compound interest in a bank account. The earlier you get started helping people, whether it's volunteering or donating money or time, the more impact you will end up having over time. And that's something that I think companies ought to be thinking about. I think the future of marketing itself is philanthropy. I think companies are going to learn that when they attach meaning to their product or service, customers and potential employees are going to be more attracted.
Question over here.
Hi, my name is Anil Sharma. My question is about the obvious. I will address the quality of new content. But have you given any thought to the content which is sitting in the current repository? Okay. There is a lot of junk content, and then there is a lot of quality content. So how do you bubble up the quality content from the current repository and then bring that to forefront?
Well, we're focused mostly now on the content that's created on our system, because that's where we can leverage the network effect, and that's where we can measure all of the signals and all of this sort of thing. One of the sort of lessons learned, I think, from content that exists on the internet now is that it's too bad that content doesn't get better the longer it's on the internet. Why is it getting out of date and less relevant? It's on a living system that can be updated at any time. So if we're not necessarily yet going and dealing with the giant massive content that's already on the internet, at least we're learning a lesson that content should get better as it ages on the internet. But at some point, I think it will make sense for us to think about existing content. And for all we know, as we open the doors to publishing on Medium, people will find a way to bring that content in and do something with it. But right now, the field of vision for us is extremely narrow. We have like 12 to 15 people working in our office, and it's just super early days, and we could change our minds tomorrow about what we're doing. So we haven't gotten that far in terms of our thinking.
The next question, Biz, is here to your right, sort of quarter of the way up.
Hi, my name's Sarah Moody, and you talked a little bit about what inspires you with this new film venture that you're doing with Ron Howard, and it made me think, I'd love to know just what inspires you just from your core across whatever venture you're doing every day. What's inspiration to you?
Well, one of the things that's really inspiring to me is that I think all people are basically good, and if you give them the right tools, they'll prove that to you on a daily basis. So I actually get inspired by weird things, like when somebody is acting like a big jerk or is like being really mean, I always ask myself what is their motivation, and how can it possibly, maybe what's the positive connotation? What are they actually trying to achieve, and what's troubling them? There's that. But aside from that, I get inspired by looking at really cool design, and I often just look through either on the internet on sites like Dribbble, or I'll go to the bookstore and I'll look through design magazines and things like this, because visuals are really inspiring to me. And I like old movies like The Bicycle Thief and Wings of Desire and things like this. Those types of things get me thinking. I'm sort of a visual person.
The next question's here in the back.
Hi, my name is T, and my question concerns the Twitter in its earlier stages. I was just curious about the testing process that went behind finding out if 140 characters were what consumers wanted.
Testing process? You mean our advanced marketing team that decided to look at, no. If we had a testing, I went through this recently in the naming of a new company, and they did market testing on some of the names that I suggested, and I just laughed to myself thinking, if we had done that with Twitter, we would never ended up with the name Twitter. The 140 characters just comes from necessity, because we were initially a mobile-based company. This is pre-iPhone, and we wanted our system, we wanted tweets to be able to be both authored and consumed in their entirety over the most rudimentary of phones all around the world. And the international limit for text messages is 160 characters. So we knew we needed to preserve room for the name of the author of the tweet, and we figured it would be unfair if, because you had a shorter name, you got more characters. So we standardized on 140, and that's how we did that. We didn't ask anyone if it was cool. We just did it.
I can't imagine the marketing team would have said tweets. Yes, call them tweets.
Yeah. No, that was that would. I think none of this would have worked if we had had like an official marketing team. We would have been shut down like on day 2.
The next question's here in the front.
Hi, how are you? My name is Mike Jutan. Just a quick question about trying to do too many things. Sounds like you're a guy who has a lot of interests and does a lot of different interesting things, and I mean a lot. And I find a problem I have a job I love. I work like crazy at. Working on an app with a friend, like volunteering on the weekends, trying to do like a lot of things all the time. And there's so many interesting things to do that, I can't really see it any other way. But I guess I've been wondering a lot lately, wondering your thoughts about where you should start to limit these things so that the quality stays good of all the things that you do.
Yeah, this is a question that Evan Williams would be great at answering, because he's fond of saying that you can only do one thing great, and that you have to focus. And I argue with him always that creativity comes from a variety of experiences and study of, cross-disciplinary study. And when you do that, when you do a lot of different things, you're able to then take a more nonlinear approach to a problem or a challenge. So I think both of these things have their place, but when you really want to, but that being said, I mean, I did work exclusively on Twitter for 5 years, and so at some point, I think Evan's right. If you want to really do something great, you have to focus completely on it, or you have to choose a business partner who is more focused than you. And that really is, and that goes to an earlier question of like lessons learned and advice. Surround yourself with people who are way smarter and way better at everything, which is what I've done consistently. Is surround myself with smarter, better people who are also nice and a joy to work with, and that's a real key. And then if your strength is that you can sort of jump from one project to another without skipping a beat, maybe you can add value to the team. And that's always been my argument. But I think both of these arguments are very valid, and so it just really depends on what the environment is and who you're working with.
The next question's in the back here.
Hi, I'm Alex. Biz, you have talked about how user experience got lowered by the different business models in online publishing. So where are you going business model-wise with Medium?
We don't know yet. We're focused first on creating a valuable experience for learning and for understanding and for really being able to experience that content in a full and rich way. And just like all the other projects that we've built before, the idea is if you can get a significant portion of the world's population using your network, there won't be a problem making money. But if you aren't creating something of value to begin with, then what's the point? So we don't always think about business model first. That being said, we have some ideas. I mean, there's a lot of rough sketches of ideas for what we could do in terms of a business model, but we like to put those on the back burner because you really can't think about those until you've at least gotten in the zone of creating some sort of value for users, a lot of users.
The next question's 2/3 of the way up to your right.
Hi, Paulo Ribeiro here. I'd like to go back to something you touched on a couple different times in terms of the new model of a corporation as well as potentially the future marketing too. And my question is this. I work with a lot of large organizations. Do you see that new model as being something that only newer companies can start, and specifically public companies seem to have such entrenched motivations? So this definition that you have, does it require totally new players, or?
No, I don't think a new definition for success in capitalism requires only applies to new companies. Absolutely not. In fact, I visited with the CMO of Citibank not so long ago, and she had new metrics. She realized that their 200-year-old company, almost went away overnight, and it was because they took their eye off of their users, and they got involved in all of this credit default swap business, and she spoke to me in words that were like really compelling. She said things like, little kids are hearing mom and dad yell at each other because of us, and we have an obligation to honor certain new metrics. And some of those metrics were, I'll get the numbers wrong, but they were like, let's prevent 1 million foreclosures this year. And of the 5 million that we know we're going to have to do, let's ease those people into rentals, because traditionally their credit gets shot. And so she realizes that those are metrics that she's going to have to hit in order to repair the brand that they've built. And so I very much think that larger corporations can also benefit from this new way of thinking. In fact, I think that the bigger companies that understand that attaching more meaningful measurements of success to their companies, to their products or services, are going to sort of leap forward in the next 5 years, and their competitors who aren't doing that are going to wonder, what's happening? What are we doing wrong? Like, we're optimizing for money and for all these other things, and somehow they're beating us. Why? And I think it's because as humanity advances, we look for more. We as consumers are now, because of the internet, we're empowered to learn the stories behind the companies, the people who run the companies, and all of these other things. And we have a new set of criteria upon which to base our choices. So these companies, the smart ones, understand it and are getting with it, no matter how big they are. Citibank, that's huge, right? So they're doing it too, and it's not just for small companies. Although small companies have the advantage of being able to weave that into the culture from the very beginning, which is great. At Twitter, we hired a corporate social responsibility person 2 years before we hired our first salesperson. So, small companies get a kind of a bonus there, but it's not just for small companies.
It's such an optimistic view.
Evan likes to say that we're hallucinogenically optimistic.
I'm
channeling Evan tonight.
Yeah, it might not be a bad place to be.
I even have fancy socks, which is what he usually wears.
Do we have another question?
Yes, next, right here on the left, on the front.
Hello, I'm Ellie, and this is a question about the evolution of the social web. You mentioned a little bit about how you view tools developing in the near future with, using advanced computer algorithms and developing better tools to get people to develop better content or to rediscover old content and make it better. But in the long run, what do you view the evolution of the social web and the place of social web in society? Is there a natural logic to the progression of the social web, or do you view the social web just as the sum of all the successful products that happen to become adopted for one reason or another?
Well, I think when we talk about the social web, we're probably talking about social networks and things like that. But I think what's happening right now is humanity is trying to figure out what the best way to use the social tools and social web is, and some people are getting fired for stupid stuff they posted. Some people are getting hired because they posted the right stuff about their interests and their volunteer work. And I think that we're still stumbling around in the sort of toddler phase of the social web, and as it matures, people will figure out the best way to use it, the most optimal way to use it. But I also think that this idea of the social web will just go away, because it's all people that are on here anyways, so everything's social. And so I think we can drop this social part and just start talking about a networked citizenry, a networked global citizenry that uses tools to move humanity forward. And it won't be called the social web anymore.
The next question's here to your right in the third row.
My name is @AmenPhoto. That's photo with an F.
That's your actual name? Oh my God.
And my question to you is, what is the status on the Biz and Livia Stone Foundation?
The status is the Biz and Livia Stone Foundation is currently operational. We're working. The goal with the Biz and Livia Stone Foundation was to approach our philanthropic endeavors. Was first of all to get them all under one umbrella, and then second of all to approach it in a modest way so that we could learn as we went and make mistakes on a smaller level rather than a gigantic level, and see if we couldn't have impact specifically in the Bay Area in regards to education and conservation. And so I would say we're still learning. It's still really early. It's only a couple of years old, but we're really happy with what we've done with schools in Oakland, Alameda, and Richmond, and the teachers that we've worked with have been fantastic. And the other organizations we work with, which have to do with the environment and things like that, are also going well. So I would just say the status is going well and sort of fully operational at this point.
The next question's here on the aisle.
You mentioned a couple of times tonight, spectacular success comes not without spectacular failure. I was wondering if you could mention how that has come up in your story.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind has nothing to do with technology, but I'll tell the story anyways. When I was in high school, I very briefly thought I would try gymnastics. And I wanted to do this maneuver called the backwards kip. And what it was is you're on your feet, and the idea is that you sort of flip backwards, land on your palms, spring up, and land back on your feet again, facing in the same direction. And it's a very impressive maneuver. And so I was trying to do it, and I figured it required massive amounts of strength in the legs and a lot of jumping. And I was falling on the ground a lot and crashing and hurting myself. And the instructor came over to me and said, "Do you want to know the secret to this trick?" And I said, "Of course I want to know the secret to it. I'm killing myself over here." So he said, "Okay, here's what you do. You fall backwards to the point where you're definitely going to fall on your spine. But because your palms and fingertips are outstretched, as soon as your fingertips touch the ground, you just give a little jump with your feet, and you'll be on your hands, and the next thing you know, you'll be up in the air and landing back on your feet." And the trick was, you need to be willing to fall on your spine on the hard floor in order for this trick to work, which is absolutely hard for your mind to comprehend. You don't want to do it. But the essence of the trick is you need to go to failure, and then success will happen as soon as you give in to that. And that was a lesson I sort of remembered and realized that if you weren't willing to give it everything and completely pack it in and apologize to everyone and say, "I'm sorry, I wasted all your money and time," then you're probably not doing it right.
The last question is here in the front to your right.
This is not a technology question, but you've talked a lot about doing good and being good, and I just wondered if you believe in a higher being or in a God.
There are definitely higher beings all around San Francisco. But I don't know. My thing has been more about, I decided when I was about 10 years old that I would be nice to everyone no matter what. And that has paid off incredibly. So that's kind of my, I don't know. I don't know if that's a higher being or not, but that's my aim, is to be nice to everyone and stay under 160 pounds for the rest of my life.
Thanks to all of you for coming. Thanks to Biz Stone and Laura Sydell.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.